pen pencil from Developer, and I'm so excited to be back today. I'm sorry I'm a little sick, so my voice is a little rough. Plus, my brain isn't all here. It's a little bit foggy just because I'm like congested and super tired and having to take decongestants. So bear with me. I'm sorry that my voice is a little raspy and kind of frog sounding. I can re-record this, but I did want to get this video out there because I've had a couple requests for basically learning to write your first smart contract. And I want this to be pretty basic and easy, so you don't have to download a bunch of extra things like Truffle or Hard Hat or even Virtual Studio Code. So if you're just like at school or if you're on a public computer, you should be able to do this pretty easily. So this is just kind of the basics of Solidity and writing your first smart contract. So every Solidity source code starts with a Solidity compiler version declaration, and this is usually done by writing pragma Solidity and then the version. So you'd see it like pragma Solidity and then get the arrow 8.0.0. So that's how you'd start and let the computer know what you're writing it in. And then usually you'd start by giving your contract a name. So let's just say for the sake of this demo, just so you kind of have the basics, it's contract. And let's name the contract develop her. And then the curly brackets. And that's where you'll put in things like units, structures, functions, so, and like variables. So let's go into variables. For example, this could be like an address variable or a Boolean variable. Something like a Boolean variable would be written like bool variable name, and something like an address would be address variable name. And again, this is not how you'd write this. This is just like trying to give you kind of the basics of things you might see in your contract in the future. So, because we're going to touch on these variables, let's also touch on constructors and functions. A constructor would be written out like this. Let's say for this one, this would be about the initial value. So that would be one, and then a function would be written out like function set, let's say strong memory underscore variable name. So that's kind of like the very, very basic of some of the things that you're going to be seeing. So just refresher, so Solidity basically follows the same syntax as like JavaScript or C. So like if else, etc. So if you have experience with that, that'll help. If not, check out my JavaScript and C videos for starters and meet us back here. But otherwise, I'll just give you a quick refresher on control structures. That'd be something like I mentioned with the if else statements, which allows to conditionally execute a defined something if the condition is met, else it'll do another command. Kind of on that same vein would be for loop statements, which takes you from the top to the bottom of a task list. Once you're at the bottom, it brings you back up to the top again until the predefined position is met or not met. And then another one that I used to use a lot for RPAs was while and do while loops, which you may find useful in your smart contract, but you might not. But Struct will always help us with creating our own data types. So let's go to Google Chrome. And I already have this kind of set up here. We are going to create a new workspace, and you'll find that here. You're going to go to remix.ethereum.org. Sorry, I should have prefaced that. And you'll get a page that looks similar to this, but you're going to create a new workspace. For me, I'm naming it my first smart contract. And then when you do, you'll get all these little files here. But I did want to take you on a quick little tour before we get too into this. Remix.ethereum, or Remix IDEs, we call it, is a great tool for like creating an ERC20 token or creating your first smart contract. So you have like your workspaces, you have, an easy way to get yourself organized, and you have your compiler, which is what you're going to need. Just kind of in general. I'm going to turn this to, I don't want nightly builds. Ew. Not you. Sorry. 0.1. So I want 0.8.1 for me for this particular thing. So you have your Solidity compiler, which lets you pick the language and everything else. I want to deselect those. Then you have your deploy and run. We're going to be using this sort of at the end. Then you have plugins. So if you wanted to get anything else in here, flatteners are great. Gaps, profilers, hard hat provider. We love hard hat. And MythX is great if you do cryptocurrency or blockchain auditing. I use MythX and Slither like you wouldn't believe. So back up here, we're going to go through contracts, artifacts, and we're going to make our own here. Get rid of that. Okay. Make our own. It's not workspace. Here we go. Sorry. Make our own. Let's call this, well, first let's actually let's call it scorecard. Because what we're going to do for this first Solidity project is, actually, we want to put it in artifacts. So let's put that in here. Let's name it scorecard.sol. Why? Because we're going to do for our first contract a almost like grading platform. So we're going to be able to access it as the teacher and give scores for math, English, and science to students. So we are going to go ahead and put that there. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Sorry. Yeah, we want that to go. So we have our first Solidity file here. You guys, I'm so sorry. I'm so tired. Anyway, so let's start off with first identifying the license. Ethereum's Remix does require you to have a like noted license. So for me, I just usually do the SP Jesus DX license. And this is just my kind of default go-to when I'm telling people, you know, what license to have. And then I'm going to write this, the double slashes. If you guys didn't watch my other video, it basically means it's going to be an unread line of code. So it's not going to affect the document besides like if you're reading the source code, it's going to tell you what kind of a license it is and maybe who prepared it and any other information. So I'm going to go ahead and put my information here. Okay, so we're starting this off with the same Pragma Solidity like we started off with before. I'm going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to do this like a version kind of range, if you will. That way it can just kind of over time adapt itself. So that's what I'm going to write. And then let's write the contract scorecard. That's the name of this document that we have here, the .sol document. And let's do some curly brackets so we can write some stuff in it. So let's start off with, let's write the student count and the address for the public teacher. That'll kind of give us a good starting point. So we'll write that student count equals right now 0. And then we want to end that. And then we want to have the address of the teacher. And we'll be able to select that address after we deploy it. So let's add a constructor. And some curly brackets. So the class teacher is going to be the message sender. That way that, you know, students aren't able to just pull up the information and modify it or add it themselves. So let's modify that only class teacher. address. There we go. So that we require that to be the class teacher. Perfect. And then let's, have it come up with a message. Only the class teacher has access to this function. Good. Excellent. And let's go there. All right. So let's do a struct statement here because we want to be able to add the student's first name, last name, and ID. So let's go ahead and add struct. It's called student details. And that'll be a string variable student first name. So we can add their first name. Let's add their last name and student ID. Student ID. I don't actually want student ID. I just want ID. And that way we can add, when we do like a function, like adding student details, we can call these things back. But before we do that, let's also make sure that we have the capacity to add the score or the grade, whatever you want to call it. Let's say student ID. So you can identify the student, and then we wanted to do English, math, and science, I think. English marks, math marks, and science marks. Okay. So while we're here, I'm also going to do a mapping. I'm going to do two, actually. I'm going to do one for student details and one for score. Student details, and then it'll just be students. Oops. Students. And I'll do mapping. And that's going to be score. And then that'll become scores. Okay. So I also want to add two events. I want to add a student, and then I also want to add an event for a score recorded, so we can add a student and then also record their score. So I'm going to actually put that here. I'm going to do event student added, and let's make this a string. Student first name, string, student last name, and then 256 underscore student ID. And this is just calling back the information that we had up here. So the student first name, student last name, and student ID. So let's make another event. We're going to do add student score recorded, and that we're going to go 256, and that's calling back this information here. So we're going to need the student ID. We're going to need the English marks. 256. We're going to need the math marks. And then we're going to need, last but not least, the science marks. And there we'll end that. Excuse me. So now let's add the function of adding the student. So we have the event, so we can call to add the student. We have to add them a function of how to add the student. So we have add student details. Now we're going to call back the string memory. Let me do student first name, student last name. And we're going to add string, memory. Perfect. So we're going to add some more down to this as well. We're going to make it so only the teacher can do it. Public only class teacher is the message sender. All right, now let's throw in some curly brackets. Actually, I want to move this down. It just is easier for me to keep track of it. Okay. So now we do the curly brackets. Let me reformat this actually. Just because I like things laid out a certain way. You don't have to do this. You can leave it all in one line and I'm never going to judge you for it. So here we go. So we're going to have student details in storage. And we're going to make this a student object. Student. So, and let's make this an array. So we have the student count on here. That way we're able to have the student count. So let's do student object again and do a dot and then do student first name, which will equal the underscore student first name. Student object dot student last name. You can kind of get the student last name, kind of get the feel for what's going on. Then we have student object, another dot, and then we're going to do ID, which is going to equal the student count. Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and do an emit also while we're here. This is for the student added. Need an underscore. Student first name, underscore, student last name, and student count. Okay. Great. So now I'm actually going to move this one down. Do I have an extra space in there? Yeah, I did. And this is just, again, a personal preference. You don't have to do this. I just like when I can see the list kind of like this, because you'll see the list here like first name, last name, and I can do first name, last name. It doesn't go all the way over here to the end of the page. So we have the function of adding student details. Let's go ahead and do the same kind of function, but for the student scores. Add student scores. Unit 256. Same concept we're going to do with the student ID. And then we're going to go through the class thing. So I think I did English, math, and science. English. And science. Okay, English, math, and science. Good, good, good. And then we're also going to make this so it's public to only the class teacher, who is the message sender. All right, throw in some curly brackets and let's go. So we're going to do score. Oops. I'm going to do another one. Score storage, store object. So similar as, like the same as above. That's going to be, we're recording the scores for the array students, underscore student ID. Nope. Student ID. All right. So then we are going to store object, period, English marks. And we're going to do the same thing again where we go underscore English marks. And when just also remember to end these in a semicolon. Score object. If it doesn't want to add, it's fine. Object. Score object. Let's do math marks. Good. Score object science marks equals underscore science marks. And then we are also going to omit student score recorded. And we want to make sure we can do this. We can, oops, have an underscore, my goodness. Student ID. And let's see, it's English again. If you can't tell, I really do struggle with having it super linear. English marks. Math marks. And science marks. I'm actually going to do the same thing that I did up there with this because it's easier for me. It also just looks cleaner. Oops. Okay. There we go. English marks, math marks, good. So I'm just going to go ahead and double check all of this. We have the license identifier, we have the Solidity compiler version, we have the name of our contract, we have this current student count, which is 0, we have the address of the public teacher, which, I mean, right now is nothing. The constructor we have as basically the admin is the teacher. We then have the modifiers so that only the class teacher can add or modify the information, and then it'll throw an error that says only the class teacher has access to this function. We have the ability to add student details and add student scores, the mapping for that, and the events to add it, and the functions to add it. So let me see if this will let me compile it. Oh, well, we already deployed it. Usually you'd compile it beforehand, but I did not. So it's going to show transaction recorded, and down here it shows that it went through. So let's go here. So this is, I want you to remember this account will be the teacher's account. So let's say adding the student first name, let's say John Doe. Okay, so we added John Doe here. Awesome, love that for us. So let's say call from class teacher, that would be us. We're allowed to do this data, have this data essentially. So for John, let's go ahead and add, he is the first student, so we're gonna mark him as 0. Let's say he got a 95, then a 92, and then an 85. We transact. So we added the scores here. And we can open that up a little bit. So you can see it gives us the information, the gas, and then it lets us know the decoded input, which would be 95, 92, and 85 for for his score. So if we were to go up, and again, we're going to copy this. This is the teachers, remember that. Let's say we're going to go here. If we wanted to add this, it would throw an error because that's not the class teacher's account. And it won't let that basically it won't let it execute. So if we go back up to the class teacher, if we wanted to, let's say, change a score to a 94, it would go ahead and let us do that again. And you can see that the math marks went to a 94. So that would be basically the summary of your first smart contract. Sorry, I had a little blip in there, but that would be start to finish, writing your first smart contract, making it so it has only one person that can modify the information, but multiple people who can see it, deploying it, and being able to use it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be making more in the coming weeks. Hopefully when I feel better. I'm going to try to make one more tomorrow with my Vicks Vapo Rub next to me. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. If you need me to go over anything else, I can make a whole nother video. We can go kind of in a deep dive to anything you guys really want to see. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.